Okay. What's going on, guys? It is the Third String Chronicles, not podcast. We're going to start doing some short form content in the sense that it's shorter than our podcast. So, hopefully, 15 to 20-minute videos every week covering different NBA topics. As you guys can see, the whole group isn't here. But that's the boring stuff. So, we're not even going to focus on it right now. So, today's topic we really wanted to talk about is Jimmy Butler. If you guys aren't super in the loop, he requested a trade from Miami about a week or so ago. And if you don't know who the owner and the GM of the Miami Heat is, it's a silly guy named Pat Riley. And let's just say he does things in the way that he likes to do them. So it's kind of like a rock trying to go against an immovable object. So we want to talk about it a little bit and talk about some mock trades that we made and see what we come to.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of this whole situation is this is just the latest iteration in what seems to be years and years of Pat Riley versus his aging superstars. Um, and it's really something because Pat Riley, on the one hand, this is the guy, more than anyone else, this is the guy behind Heat culture. Before Dwayne Wade was there, before LeBron James was there, before we had, the eighth seed in Miami Heat make the finals just a few years ago, Pat Riley was the one instilling Heat culture in Miami, in that amazing city with many different amazing teams. But on the other hand, you see just this long history of superstars getting older, winning fewer games, perhaps getting injured a couple times, and then falling out of love with Pat Riley and the two of them, or whoever it may be, just having this massive, massive, usually really public breakdown. I mean, Shaquille O'Neal traded in, traded out, right? Or let go. Dwayne Wade should have retired a Heat. Instead, he had this weird little tour all the way around the league and then came back for a year or so. LeBron James at the end of those final runs as well, and now Jimmy Butler, after a couple of overachieving seasons, even a finals appearance, and what, quite frankly, was not a finals roster. We're starting to see the latest signs of yet another breakdown. So, my question to you, Lucas, is who do you think is more justified here? The man who built the Heat or the player who's been pouring his heart and soul into this team for the past 4 or so years?
If I have to be honest, and I think I talked about this a little bit in the group chat when it first got announced that like he didn't want to go to Milwaukee or Memphis or anything like that. I was very anti Jimmy. I was like, you're gonna demand a trade and now you're gonna be picky about where they want to send you. When he went on record and went, I'll play for any of the other 29 teams and I'll be happy. Like, but now you're being picky. So at first I was like, it feels a little annoying and tantrumy. But I started to think about it more and put it into perspective when I was talking to some other people. They go and they say like in the last few years that Jimmy's been with the Heat, obviously they made it to the finals in 2020. They made it again against Denver. They were a three-pointer that against the Boston Celtics away from making it a third time. And every single year, Miami has just decided to, we'll make a $5 million signing here or a veteran minimum signing here. And Jimmy, like, you're gonna go. We're good enough to do it again. Tyler Hero's gonna be healthy next year. That's all we need. They let Damian Lillard go. Shoot, they let Bradley Beal go, and Bradley Beal got traded for a bag of chips. They let Kevin Durant wasn't really rumored to go there. Same with Kyrie Irving, but he was available in the Jimmy Butler era of the Miami Heat, and they passed on both of them, unwilling to give up Jaime Jaquez Jr., which good player, hasn't had the best season, but is he worth telling your star player, no, we're not going to go get Damian Lillard? Heck no. You got to go satisfy your player because it's true. He's willed them to the finals twice when those teams had no reason to even be, shoot, in the conference finals those years, just based on talent. Um, so I can understand why Jimmy Butler's so frustrated. Like, I mean, I don't have the talent to be that good, but to be carrying your team, to give them everything you have, and then for them to be like, no, we're not going to bring you the help that you want. I understand it's frustrating, and I'm more on Jimmy's side now, but also as Miami, I can understand like maybe passing on those things because you don't want to give up your whole future, which ends up being the question with a lot of the teams now, especially like if you look at the Warriors, like, do we want to give up our future to maximize the window for Stephen Curry? It depends on what side you land on. I personally land on you got to maximize the player that you have right now if you want to be competitive, especially because Miami wants to be competitive since their pick is going to go to Oklahoma City if they're bad enough. And that would be a travesty. And I will die inside a little bit.
I think that the funny part about that though is not only has Miami not gone after high profile players on the market, you said Dame, you said Bradley Beal, they've let their own homegrown, this is the part about like so-called heat culture in the like past two free agency cycles that's really made me a little hurt on the inside is you have all these homegrown players, undrafted. You got stories of Eric Spoelstra and like heat officials going to like semi-pro leagues and like rec leagues and like watching guys play basketball. And yet when it comes time to pay these guys real money, what happens? Gabe Vincent, $8 million goes to Los Angeles. Max Strus, $15 million goes to Cleveland. Love him, great player. He should have stayed in Miami. Now Caleb Martin is playing for Philadelphia on like basically a minimum. Like a 1 year or 2 years deal, like a low signing. These are guys that should stay in Miami. And I understand now, like, part of building a culture is keeping the same guys around. And I think the good GMs, the really good GMs, before they go and maximize their window, they understand that and they try to keep their like I take a look at what the Thunder have done. They signed Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe, two guys who are like bottom of the league kind of players when they first came to the Thunder. Took them maybe 2 or 3 years to develop into rotation pieces. Now they're on long-term deals. Cheap long-term deals, but long-term deals. They're staying around with the team. They might be rumored in a couple trades, but they have a future secured and they're helping contribute to a winning culture. Miami has not done that in the past few years. Not only have they not made big splashes, they haven't even like padded out the bottom and done the bare minimum of building a championship contender, which is keeping your supporting cast consistent. And I think it's the same issue you see a little bit with the Lakers, where every year they keep the same three-star players and rotate role players, and then you come to the playoffs and there's no chemistry, no one knows what they're doing. You kind of stand around and watch Jimmy Butler, watch LeBron James, whichever team you're talking about, cook. And I can understand why now when Jimmy Butler's approaching his what likely will be his last contract, if we're being frank, this is probably going to be his last major contract.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, he's old. He's really old. I can understand why he's so frustrated because they haven't done anything to make life easier for him. So, with that, you want to take a
Sorry.
look at where he potentially might be traded to?
I just want to say one thing real quick about that. I think and maybe I'm overstepping, I don't keep up with the Heat as much as like I have cousins that live in Miami that love the Heat. And to be clear, they side with Jimmy, which I think is really interesting. But I think the Heat kind of, I don't know if ego is the right word, but I feel like they think they can just kind of like bring in the next guy if they let their homegrown player go. For example, like, Gabe Vincent, Kendrick Nunn, Max Strus, they all came out. And then who comes in? DeLon Wright got signed super cheap and he was really good for them. Caleb Martin comes in and he played awesome for them in the regular season and stepped it up even more in the playoffs. And I think they kind of let these guys go. Specifically, I want to talk about Caleb Martin because I know you said 1 or 2 year deal. He's actually on a 4 year deal with Philadelphia,
I
but
knew
the
that.
amount is still super cheap. He's 4 year, 35 million. That's not even 8 million. Actually, it's a little bit more than 8 million a year. But in today's NBA with the amount of salary cap that's going higher and higher, like that's chump change. Let's be real. And he's not having the best year in Philly, but I think if he had stayed in Miami, when you have a rhythm with a certain team, it helps your consistency to stay with that team, you know? And so I think they kind of figured, oh, we can let Caleb Martin go, like we can let these guys go. We brought in Khalil Ware, and I like Khalil Ware, but he's not ready to be like a hard contributor this season. They probably thought, oh yeah, we brought in Alec Burks to replace Caleb Martin. Like Alec Burks isn't that good. He's passable at best in a rotation. He's probably not really getting any deep playoff run rotation minutes. Um, I think they get caught up with the Heat culture mindset where, whoever we bring in for cheap is just going to step up because we have that kind of culture around us. They're the kind of player that we want. They're gonna step up to the ability that we need them to. And I think this is the first season where it's really hitting them like our role players aren't doing exactly what we expected them to. And that's even with like Haywood Highsmith having a really good season and Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro's taking another step that I didn't think he had in him. Like I didn't expect him to be a borderline all-star. Like that's how good he's been. Um, and I think it's just really coming back to shoot them in the foot. Um,
And
and
really,
so
it's just you
yeah,
don't expect this level of discontinuity and inconsistency from a team that, historically has been very good. The Miami Heat, we know them as one of the better teams in NBA history. And, this really makes me wonder if Pat Riley in his old age has lost a step. I mean, everyone saw the jokes last year during the draft about everyone making moves and everyone making trades, and then Pat Riley asleep at the
oh
wheel.
yeah.
Trade deadline. Yeah, you remember, right?
I think
And
it was the Heat and there was another team that didn't make a trade out of the whole deadline. And
maybe
yeah, they were
Denver.
getting,
Maybe it might have
oh
been Denver.
maybe.
Yeah, Denver doesn't make many trades. Or maybe Los Angeles, the
I think
Clippers,
it might have been the Lakers. I think it might have been the Lakers.
Lakers. Oh
I
yeah,
think
well we
so.
know how the Lakers management is not good either. But that's a topic for another video.
So
So do you
yeah, I
have
mean,
oh yeah, go ahead.
oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say, he's getting up there. But I think before we talk about mock trades, it is important to note because like when I started looking into his stats, I was, still a little surprised that he's been well, one, he was suspended, and before the suspension, he had like back-to-back games where he only took like I think 5 shots or something like that, which is inexcusable for a guy like Jimmy Butler. No doubt because he's disgruntled and he wants to leave. But even with his terrible games, the man is still shooting. I mean, he's still averaging 18 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Like he's not bad. He's putting up solid numbers and he's disgruntled. And if you look at efficiency, this is one of his more efficient seasons in like the last decade. He's shooting 38% from three, only 1.5 attempts, but even the fact that he's shooting that high on low volume, that's not a bad sign. Like the real kicker is just the fact that he wants to get paid and not a lot of teams, good teams specifically, have the kind of money to be able to give him what he wants. And so we've mocked up a few trades that we're going to talk about a little bit. Two of them, one of them specifically, I think seems a little far-fetched, but might as well have some fun with it. So I want to start with one of the more a trade that I would like to see personally, and it's going to be Jimmy Butler going to the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets don't have a lot of salary to work with, so there's going to be a lot of names involved, but stick with me. So Denver is going to be moving Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, Dario Saric, Hunter Tyson, and 2 protected first round picks, one lottery protected, one top 10 protected. So fairly safe. And the Nuggets are going to get Jimmy Butler and they're also going to get Alec Burks, who should be able to help them in the regular season. He's shooting really well from three, and the Nuggets need that spacing. So throw him in there a little bit just to give him something.
What are your initial thoughts when you take a look at this mock?
Well, for me, I think Jimmy Butler's at least worth 2 first round picks. I don't care that he's getting paid as much as he is. I know it's not a good contract, but for a team to come in and get Jimmy Butler, I think he's still going to produce at a top 25, top 30 level player because Jimmy Butler is still Jimmy Butler. And undeniably, if you get into the playoffs with Jimmy Butler, he is going to be a riser from what we've seen in the past. Maybe not, if he's on the Nuggets, he's not going to be better than Jokic. But we saw last year when they were eliminated by the Minnesota Timberwolves in game 7, Nikola Jokic was doing everything he could, and nobody else on the team could get anything to go for them. Jamal Murray was cold. Michael Porter Jr. was cold. Nothing. So if you add a guy like Jimmy Butler with the greatest offensive player we have in the league right now, that is a deadly duo to be able to put anything up against. And they still get to keep Jamal Murray. They still get to keep Aaron Gordon. They keep Christian Braun, Russell Westbrook, who shout out to Russell Westbrook. He's had an awesome season. He
Real,
yeah,
great season out of him.
amazing season. Really,
Totally.
really awesome. So happy for him. And for the Heat, I mean, obviously, you get off Jimmy Butler's contract. Granted, you are taking on Michael Porter Jr.'s contract, which is sitting at around $36 million dollars a year. But for the Heat to be able to get rid of Jimmy Butler, they're going to have to take a lot of money anyways. And they're taking a lot of money in a solid young player. I don't think Michael Porter Jr. is going to come in and be an all-star, but you put Michael Porter Jr. next to Tyler Hero, next to Bam Adebayo, that's not a bad guy to have next to your guys when you don't want to lose, when you don't want to suck. He has the ability to win you a few games in the season just with how good he shoots. And obviously Miami also takes in 2 first round picks, heavily protected. If they don't convert, they don't convert, and they get whatever they get from that. Miami isn't in the biggest position to be demanding picks, so I think 2 first round picks, even if they are protected, is fairly fair for them.
I when I take a look at this, I think first I think about the way Denver plays basketball. They always like to have one floor spacer out there, whether that's Michael Porter Jr., whether that's the young guy Julian Strother, right?
Yeah, I
They
like
always
Julius
like to have a
Randle.
ball handler. They like Jamal Murray, and now that's why Russ has been doing really good because not only can he handle the ball, he can make the lead pass all the time, right? And he keeps the
Yep.
guys heavily energized. And then obviously they have Jokic, and obviously they have Aaron Gordon anchoring the offense and defensive respectively. I think giving them Jimmy Butler, and I understand this might be a desperation move with the Nuggets having a little bit of a worse season than some might have expected. I think the biggest issue is you're adding in another player who takes below two threes a game. And I think that alone is a problem for them. And in the context of you're putting this guy in a system where Russell Westbrook, not a great shooter, Nikola Jokic, good shooter, but likes to be in the post, and then Aaron Gordon, not a shooter, dunker spot, low block kind of offensive player or a cutter roller kind of guy. I think ultimately this might clog up Denver's offense just a little bit more, even if it gives them another guy who can handle the ball. I think about one team that reminds me of what the Nuggets might look like if they added Jimmy Butler is honestly the Sacramento Kings. We see this year with DeMar DeRozan; they're looking a little shaky. They rattled off a couple of good wins. They just beat the Celtics. But I
Props
think,
to him.
sorry.
I said props to him.
Oh yeah, I mean most of that's Sabonis. He's been insane this year. I think Sabonis is just getting better and better every year.
I
But I think
mean, it also helps that Kevin Porter and Keegan Murray finally decided to start hitting some threes. Thank God. I mean, yeah, it was ugly.
Oh yeah, but I think the biggest issue with the Nuggets adding Jimmy Butler and then taking away their best. I mean, Michael Porter Jr. He's still shooting around 40, like over 40% from three, and he takes a decently high number of them. I think this would clog up their offense just a little bit, even if the numbers at first look a little bit better, just because Jimmy's a little bit of a pure scorer. I think the two-man game between Butler and Jokic is pretty nice. Both of them like to work the mid range. Both of them like to get down low, like get downhill, and both of them are pretty cerebral players. I think if you put a lineup of Westbrook and Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic on the floor, that's some of the best passing in the league. But then you're sacrificing a lot of floor spacing. So this would be a very tough lineup for Michael Malone to work with. And I do not think that the Nuggets would want to give up their best floor spacer for a guy who is a non-factor outside of the arc.
That's fair. Like I said, before we keep going with the mock trades, Jimmy Butler is such a hard player to work with in terms of trades. Really not many places are left. I love the fit for him in Memphis, and then he went and told his agents to tell people not to trade him to Memphis. So, he's gonna get traded one way or another. So the next trade is kind of a homer trade, I'm gonna be honest. So I have Jimmy Butler because for some reason the Spurs are reported to be one of the emerging teams. I don't think anything's gonna happen, honestly, but let's have some fun and let's have some fun and mock him to Miami or mock him to San Antonio. I'm sorry. So right now we have Jimmy Butler straight up going up to San Antonio. San Antonio is going to be giving up Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, 2 second round picks, and the 2026 Spurs first round pick, top five protected.
I think this is a gorgeous trade for both sides. And I know that not a lot of people like to see a good player end up on what's currently a mediocre team. But let me tell you why I think this is a great trade. I think number one, Jimmy Butler's a winner before anything else. And Greg Popovich is also a winner before anything else. I think that's a culture fit made, like a match made in heaven. I think both of those guys would click right off the bat. I also think Jimmy Butler, with the energy and the motor he plays with, would be really good for a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who has such a natural gravity to him. Really tall, draws doubles, shoots the three really well, and at a high volume. I think those two would be really good for each other. Chris Paul leading the offense, obviously a very cerebral mind. I think the return for Miami here might give me a little pause. You know, you have Keldon Johnson, who's a good NBA player, perhaps just a hint overpaid. And then you have Zach Collins, who is barely a rotation player, and who likely would not crack the Heat's rotation. You know, they don't like the way Zach Collins plays basketball. They don't play that way.
I don't
He's
like
not
the
much.
way Zach Collins plays
Well, no one
basketball.
likes the way Zach Collins plays basketball. But you take a look at like he's a shooting big, doesn't really roll that hard, you know, can't really grab a rebound, and is not like is kind of soft on defense, very soft on defense, right? And then you look at the Heat, who just drafted with their first round pick a player who rolls hard, grabs rebounds, defends the ball pretty well, and also has an emerging jump shot in Khalil Ware. I think Zach Collins is immediately benched if he goes to Miami. Trey Jones ends up just being salary filler on a 1 year expiring. So there's no one really in the player section of this deal that I think really stands out. The picks, on the other hand, a top five protected 2026 first rounder from San Antonio is pretty good. That likely will end up being what I think is a middle of the pack pick. That's 1 year out from now. And the Spurs, despite continuously improving year after year, probably aren't in the position to contend like top half of the West yet. So that probably will still be in the lottery. I think that's great for Miami on the return. They do shed a lot of salary. I think this is an if need be kind of deal for Miami.
Hmm. Yeah, I honestly pretty much agree with that. I think something, although again, I'm not entirely convinced this even has a chance of happening. But something else that Jimmy Butler would get to San Antonio as the San Antonio fan, a big problem with us is that down the stretch, especially in the fourth quarter, Victor Wembanyama, there are some games where he'll take over, and then there are some games where he looks a little passive in the fourth quarter. And I think part of that is that, teams really zero in on him. And so they try to keep the ball out of his hands. And because he's not so predominantly perfect in the post, he likes to stick at the 3-point line. And it's much easier to stop the ball from getting into his hands at the 3-point line than it is in the post when he has his back up against somebody. Um, and right now on the team, you would imagine Devin Vassell or Chris Paul take the reins in the fourth quarter as they have shot creating ability. But Devin Vassell has had a little bit of an off month or so, and it's been not terrible. Like he has his moments, but not really what a lot of fans have chalked him up to be as a potential second option. Realistically, he would probably fit more in as a perfect third option. And if you put Jimmy Butler there to take a lot of the gravity off Devin Vassell, um, it really helps him. And Jimmy Butler's obviously Jimmy Butler, so he comes in the fourth quarter and he can do what the Spurs need him to do because if they close games better, they would at least have a 4 to 5 win jump on the season. Um, so again, maybe you add a first round pick, maybe you change the players, but San Antonio is being reported as an option. So if something was to happen, I imagine it looks something like this because I don't really think San Antonio has any urgency or inclination to move Devin Vassell or Jeremy Sohan in a trade for Jimmy Butler just because Miami doesn't really have leverage. And now for the last trade, which I think I might have given a little too much to Miami in this trade. I might need to adjust it just a little bit. It is a three-teamer. So Memphis being told they can't go get Jimmy Butler, they switched their eyes to a different forward who can kind of plug and play with them pretty easily. And he's had a little bit of a down season, so he might be cheaper than he normally is. So Memphis is going to go out and get Paul George. Philadelphia is going to bring in Jimmy Butler. And Miami is going to be getting Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and Luke Kennard for salary. They're going to get a first round top five protected pick from Philadelphia next year. And they're going to get 2 second round picks. Originally, I had Memphis giving up a first round pick. I might take that back, or you can put protections on it, however you prefer, or like a pick swap, something like that. Um, that can be adjusted. But generally speaking, that is the idea of the trade.
I think. Initially, what strikes me is Jimmy Butler and the 76ers had a really messy divorce at the end
Hmm.
of the failed experiment there with the entire 76ers organization. I don't know if he would ever want to play basketball for that team again. That aside, I'm a little more open to exploring how this trade works. I think, first of all, fit wise, the Sixers are just going to replace Paul George with Jimmy Butler. That makes
Hmm.
perfect sense, right? And he steps into a very similar role that will be even more condensed, right? Instead of Tyler Hero, you have Tyrese Maxey. Instead of Kyle Lowry, you have Jaron McCain. Oh, he's hurt. Never mind. So instead of Tyrese Maxey, or instead of Tyler Hero, you have Tyrese Maxey, and instead of Bam Adebayo, you have Joel Embiid. Immediately, that means Jimmy Butler is going to be doing a lot less. It means he can focus on making shots within the flow of
Yep.
the offense, having the ball in his hands just a little less, and perhaps a little less strain on his body at his old age. I think this is a perfect fit for him in like career wise. I don't know if he wants to play in Philadelphia organization. Moving on to the Grizzlies, I don't know what the Grizzlies would think about having replacing a couple of rotation players or borderline rotation players for an underperforming superstar in Paul George. Marcus Smart is heavily overpaid. Brandon Clark is pretty good, actually. I think Brandon Clark is one of the more
Oh
underrated
yeah,
players in the NBA. Luke Kennard is
100%.
very scratch of the rotation these days, just because he's not very useful outside of shooting. He doesn't have much of a ball handling toolkit, and he's not a great defender. So I don't see him giving up too much in terms of personnel. However, the skill sets that each of those guys individually present is very useful for a coach like Taylor Jenkins, who has been known to make like mid-game, like pretty substantial mid-game adjustments. And you're
Oh yeah.
replacing all that with a single guy in Paul George, who has a wide skill set but is performing pretty poorly to start this year. I think for the Grizzlies, this is a very not only a very win now move, it's also what seems to be a desperation move, which doesn't make sense to me as they are performing pretty well as a team this year. I would like to hear what you think about Paul George and his fit with the Grizzlies offensively in particular.
For sure. I mean, I agree that maybe it seems a little bit desperate. We know that they wanted to, or at least we know that there was an interest from them for Jimmy Butler because they were told not to trade for Jimmy Butler. If you're not interested, you wouldn't even need to be told you don't have to. So we know at least off of that that they were at least a little inclined. Now this package is virtually identical to what they most likely would have been giving up for Jimmy Butler. I think Jimmy Butler's having a little bit better of a season than Paul George. I think both of them have been a little up and down. Paul George specifically, I think if Memphis makes this move, they're banking on a bounce back. I think Jimmy Butler, I'm sorry, I think Paul George doesn't really I don't think he lost his talent from last year. I think he came into Philadelphia expecting, all right, Joel Embiid, you're my one. Tyrese Maxey, you're my two. Let me be my three. We got guys on the bench, Caleb Martin, Eric Gordon. All these guys are going to do their thing. We're going to be good. Unfortunately, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre all have been underwhelming this season for Philadelphia, which means Paul George, you got to make up for what our bench is doing. Oh, yeah. And then Joel Embiid misses like the first 20 games of the season. And then, oh yeah, Tyrese Maxey gets hurt. And then, oh yeah, the rookie of the year, had he been healthy, got hurt. So Jimmy Butler, I mean, again, sorry, Paul George, um, has been underwhelming, but I think the load that he was expected to take has been higher than what he imagined because of all that's going on in Philadelphia. I think if you put him next to Ja, Bane, Jaren Jackson, shoot, Zach Edey, like Santi Aldama, like I think if you put him around those guys, his job becomes exponentially easier. And I also think, oops, sorry, that's something I got to cut out. I also think, he just rounds out that lineup because what Memphis would have wanted in Jimmy Butler probably would have been spacing, taking over if he needs to, like in small bursts, because I mean, with John and Jaren, you don't need to be doing everything. I think Paul George, in the long run, even though he's shooting a worse percentage, will be a better shooter because he's taking more attempts and he has the history of being a better shooter than Jimmy Butler. Um, he is a little bit longer, and so he can give you a little bit more on defense, even though Jimmy has a higher motor, so it's kind of give and take. Um, And as to the point of rotation players, I do agree that, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard are all solid to good rotation players. Uh, Memphis can make up for that instantly. Marcus Smart can't be in your bench. Oh, we got Scottie Pippen Jr., who was fantastic until Ja came back and they cut his minutes. Still a fantastic player. Um, oh, you get rid of Brandon Clark. Oh, we got Santi Aldama. We got Zach Edey. We got Jay Huff. Jay Huff specifically. Awesome this year. I wish he could get more minutes. It's just a problem when you have a good team. Oh, we lose Luke Kennard. Oh, we have Vince Williams coming back when he's done with his injury. Oh, Gigi Jackson's going to come back in the next few months. Like they have, oh, Jalen Wells has been awesome too.
Oh
Like
yeah,
they
all of this
have
is still true.
so
Yeah.
many good players on that team where you can give up these guys and sure, maybe you lose a little bit of the amount of changes you can make throughout the course of the game, but the talent upgrade and the fact that you have so many guys on your bench that can come in and produce, they're ready. They've proven that they can do it. Feels like a safe move because they would have had to extend Jimmy anyways, and he probably was going to get paid more than Paul George is getting paid right now. Like it feels like you're getting Jimmy Butler, but it's just Paul George. And I think they have different strengths. But if they really wanted to go all in this year, when honestly, the really only biggest problem in the West is OKC. If they think, okay, we can take it to OKC, maybe we just need to improve a little bit, or if they miss out on Cam Johnson, like I don't think it's the worst move they can make. And as to your point, with Jimmy maybe not wanting to play in Philly, Joel Embiid has gone on record saying he loved playing with Jimmy Butler. Like he said he would have loved for him to stay. Like all this stuff. I think Joel Embiid can come up to Jimmy Butler and be like, dude, we were one shot away from making the finals. This team on paper should be better than that team. Tyrese Maxey is a better third option than Ben Simmons was because they killed Ben Simmons' confidence. Now you don't have JJ Redick on that team. Oof, JJ Redick on that team would be nice. But I think he can convince Jimmy to give Philadelphia another chance, especially because I'm sure Daryl Morey would be like, yeah, we should have taken you over Tobias Harris. So I do agree that maybe it would take a little bit of convincing, but I think Joel Embiid is the kind of guy that can not only get the Philadelphia front office to do something, but also to convince Jimmy Butler that maybe it's worth giving it another shot in Philadelphia instead of, anywhere else.
The other thing I find really interesting about this trade, at least for Memphis, I'm focusing on Memphis mainly because I think they're the closest to contention
Oh
of the three
yeah.
involved here. Um, everyone else in the West is gearing up to play Oklahoma City, and Oklahoma City is gearing up to make themselves better as well. What Paul George, I think, gives you is somebody else who's historically been the point of attack defender, right? I mean, this is a team which, if they when they make the playoffs, will have to deal with guys like Shea, Anthony Edwards, um, Luka Doncic if the Mavs are fully healthy, a lot of really good one options in the West. I think Paul George has been the guy to face up with a lot of these guys, especially when he played in Los Angeles. You saw him guard a lot of these players. You saw Kawhi Leonard guard them sometimes. But Paul George has got that experience that I think the rest of the Grizzlies don't. I also think he
Yep.
gives them a little bit more size on the wing, which, Desmond Bane famously is really, really short with really short arms. I think that's something that they've been missing as well on the wing, especially. So I do like the fit. I just think the Grizzlies should hesitate a little bit, consider if they want to give up all these guys, especially given their injury history last season, where the entire team was out for like a month. I think adding Paul George and then subtracting a little bit of rotation depth may not be the wisest move. But they seem to be a really deep team this year. You were right, Jay Huff is really good. Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams both look really nice. I think if they want to take that shot now before teams like the Spurs and the Thunder like strengthen their hold on the West in the future, this might be a really, really good move for them
Yep.
just this season.
For sure. I think undeniably, whatever goes on in the next few weeks with Jimmy Butler is going to be super entertaining and interesting to watch. No doubt that whenever something happens, we'll be here to talk about it and break it down a little bit. But for now, that's all the time we have. So, you know, if you have any ideas, comments, trade proposals, let it down in the comments. We're going to try to be doing weekly uploads. Hopefully, not as overbearing as a podcast can be. Just chill, talk some hoops. So yeah, we hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for watching. Bye bye.